the Maghreb, and Jose will explain which is the main objective and the focus of this session. So, Nele, we can start? Can we start?
Yes, I think we can start. Kamel, I hope you can hear us. Can you say something so we know that we can hear you too? If not, because we don't hear you. I don't know if you are talking. You should be able, because you're a presenter. So if on the bottom you have options to activate your camera and your microphone. So maybe your microphone is still switched off, so you can try there. And yeah, I think in order not to wait any longer, welcome to this TRANSGANG Training Seminar. As Carla said before, we're really happy to count with numerous local researchers of our project today. So this is a really good opportunity to see each other. And sorry, I will, Jose, just one moment, I will put it away.
Yeah.
So, Kamel, yes.
Hello, Nili.
Yes, perfect.
Ah, yeah, that's fine.
Okay, we don't see you.
No, she should.
You should activate your camera at the bottom.
Yeah. No. Do you see me now?
No, unfortunately not. Wait, I think it's... No, we don't see you. It's good. We talked about this before. Now we see you. Now we can see you. Perfect. This is so great.
Okay, Kamel. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah. Hello, colleague.
Yeah, it's a kind of bad connection, but this is like the virtual world, and I think we have to live with it, that the connections, they come and go, and we just make the best of it. So, so welcome to the training seminar. This one will be the first one that we move a little bit from the theoretical part to the region of the research in Transgang. So this will be the first comparative perspectives and on the region of North Africa. And the local researchers, together with the regional ethnographic coordinator, Jose Sánchez, they will share with us important theoretical and methodological ideas and issues that they have discovered and are discovering during their fieldwork in the different countries and the different case studies. So first we will have an introduction by Jose Sánchez, and then Sihem Najar will talk about the case study in Tunisia, followed by Kamel Bourchef, who will talk to us about border spaces and youth in Algeria, and finally Rachid Touhtouh from Morocco about the situation of youth street groups and resistance in the case studies in Morocco they have chosen. So important for the participants and also for the speakers. Please turn off your microphone and your camera if you're not presenting. So this will improve the connections. And the participants, you can participate via the chat during the. And also, as Carlos presented now, you can raise your hand if you have a question or want to add something. You can do this during the presentations, and in the end we will have also a round of questions, so there you can participate and open the microphone and ask a question directly, and we can share all together. And as you have seen, I hope this is okay for everyone. This session is recorded, so later we can share this also on social media and the web page of the project, etc. So I hope this is okay with you. And so, without further prolongation, I will give the word to Jose. And I hope you will enjoy this session.
Okay, we can start, yes? We start? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for your interest in this seminar about the street groups in the Maghreb region. The main aim of this session is trying to discuss central topics in the research that the Transgang teams are doing in each location, and try to trace or to remark some kind of general perspective to permit our comparative work after the data analysis collection. So, I will try to trace the shared signals that from each of the locations, this means Casablanca and Rabat, Algiers, Jendel, and Tunisia, allow us to establish spaces for comparison, both at regional and global levels, or about the relationships of youth groups with their environment, with other street groups and social and institutional agents, and to observe the identifications, ideological, religious, political, musical, sports, of the members through their practices. This means economic practices, leisure practices, and ritualistic practices. All those things without forgetting that their subjectivities, the youth group members' subjectivities and specificities that are particular to the region. So next point is about cross-cutting elements that we can find in these locations, about the research on youth street groups, conditions and practices. If you have a careful analysis of the youth street groups in this region, we can find a complex image in which some cross-cutting elements stand out. The first one is the scarcity of research on the gang phenomenon in the region. The second one is the marginalization of large groups of the youth population who react by being part of youth street groups. The third way is the way of understanding violence and mediation processes. And four is the signification of the concept of street and neighborhood in relation to what we have termed as border areas and place stages where sociabilities of youth street groups are produced in Algeria, Morocco, and Tunisia. And finally, the dimensions that violence acquires in relation to youth street groups in the region. So, according to this, a fundamental question appears as a corollary of this general situation. This question could be formulated like, how do youth street groups form and operate within the multiple constraints, limitations, and opportunities of being young, Muslim, marginalized, and subject to the social control that exists in the Maghreb? This is a general question that it could be interesting to answer with our different approaches. What means researching youth streets in the Maghreb in this time? The first thing is that the Transgang project is a very, very important challenge for the academic studies on youth street groups in the region. So everybody knows that the demographics of the region with large numbers of youth population imply that young people are gradually occupying a central place in the politics and culture of these societies as a combined result of the neoliberal globalization, geopolitics of the neo-imperialism, the emergence of a discourse of civilization in which Islam is positioned in opposition to the West, coupled with ever-widening levels of college graduates without jobs. Thus, the youth question is often framed as a paradox, as both a problem and an opportunity. As a problem, it is related to security, anxiety about the increasing youth unemployment, inequality, civil and regional conflict, drug use, extremism, and violence of youth street groups, which create a moral panic against deviant young people, as Luca Queirolo explains in his book about youth street gangs. If we review the literature on youth street groups, it reveals that different issues have been analyzed in relation to the problems of violence, criminality, and juvenile delinquency, generally from a perspective dominated by the North American criminological tendency. Although these studies shed light on the criminalization process and on the emergence of violence, they don't allow us to understand the dynamics of the groups, the relationship with the other street groups, with the state and his institutions, and even less the relationship to being denied social recognition, as well as the precariousness in which they find themselves. In this sense, TRANSGANG project has been a challenge, an opportunity to establish narrative and discourses that come from the youth street groups themselves, setting up an original and non-Eurocentric perspective. In our framework, post-cultural studies and the colonial perspective meet critical criminology. Our focus is on questioning traditional conceptions and uncovering false beliefs about crime and criminal justice. As a result, crime is seen as a product of the oppression of subaltern groups within society, such as young people, women, and ethnic minorities, because young members have no choice but to resist these relationships of domination. This perspective emphasizes the creative and assertive capacity of the members of the street groups, their cultural productions, and their forms of sociability and resistance practices, which are, of course, contradictory and ambiguous against a set of discriminatory processes determined by their social age. One of the main obstacles has been to accommodate cultural differences in the research design with comparative purposes. The Eurocentric trend to use North American experiences as heuristics for experiences in other parts of the world means criminalizing the youth groups by using the term gang. By framing our understanding of street gangs and youth groups through debates on post-colonialism and critical subcultural studies, we understand that this trend can be reversed, especially in the Maghreb, where there is no tradition of research on gangs. In particular, we focus on the different exchanges between researchers on the definition of youth street groups from a local perspective, proposing functional definitions to avoid Western points of view and the coloniality of knowledge following Mignolo. So, in the Maghreb case, the term gang is ignored due to its colonial origin. The general term used to refer to a criminal youth group is Ishaba, while the term Shila is used to designate a group of street youth, in general in the modern Standard Arabic. As we see, but however, there are other related terms from the national and local context, and those expressed in colloquial Arabic, such as Hittis in Algeria or Charmils in Morocco, which are used to denominate different street groups. In addition, another challenge has to do with the naming process associated with the research into youth gangs. Also, the process of assigning characteristics to gang groups helps determine how conflicts and social problems are framed. If we focus on gangs only as a social problem, we ignore fundamental structural issues such as racism, poverty, and social inequality. Without this sensitivity, we could fall into the difficulty of not being able to capture the fluidity and contradiction inherent in the identification of youthful street sociabilities, creating an artificial sense of similarity between different cultural contexts. So the image of the gang as socially dangerous or harmful prevents gangs from becoming pro-social organizations or more organized criminal entities, often leading to the intervention of the state control agents. Hence, the researchers have not adopted the term gang in the Maghreb region because they do not accept using the label, because the imaginary and symbolic fields that the concept opens are very far from the realities of street youth who sell gold in Algeria or other places or seek a precarious living in the streets. By not using this term, it is possible to prevent their criminalization and stigmatization also. We thus change the way we talk about these groups, obviating the term gang, an empty signifier over which a continuous struggle operates that is also outside the North African cultural forms. So, what then is the situation of the members of youth street groups in the Maghreb? This is this part of the presentation try to combine and offer a general image of youth street groups in the Maghreb according to the background papers produced by the different local researchers and local ethnographic teams. The situation is a combination of a growing youth population, unemployment, marginalization, and a general sense of deprivation as giving young people exceptional status as harbingers of radicalism and a threat to stability. Although most young people in Maghreb societies and communities share many common social, political, and economic misfortunes, they exhibit markedly different responses to these situations. One of these answers to this situation is the spontaneous grouping in the neighborhood streets, which allow young people to escape from this marginalization. So if the youth group responses in the four selected cities, Casablanca, Rabat, Algiers, Jendel, and Grand Tunis, understood as ethnographic scenarios, have something in common. This is marginalization, the stigma and the exclusion of youth groups, whether for political, ideological, generational, cultural, socioeconomic, or spatial reasons. According to the analysis process proposed in our methodological manual, the comparison is between core cases in the Maghreb region, Rabat, Saleh, and contract cases, Algiers, Jendel, and Grand Tunis. All of these scenarios are located in urban environments because cities play a crucial role in cultivating a particular awareness of youth, as proposed by the circular perspectives represented by Asef Bayat, among others. So the public parks, the commercial centers, markets, the souks, the corners or coffees provide key locations for the formation of youth street groups as elements of identity. Aided to this is the expansion of information and communication technologies, the spread of fashion trends and global consumer products, and a tendency towards the nuclear family, which are all transforming the social structure and political economy of the research field. So, street groups are then strategies for escaping from this situation and generate action spaces, cultures of resistance, and social protests that challenge the established social order as a whole. Thus, the youth street groups can be seen as a generation gap and also as a strategy for benefiting from their marginalized and, according to institutional actors, deviant position. In summary, we consider gangs, much better, street groups, youth street groups in the region, as a dynamic cultural formation in a context of exclusion and social transformation. This permits or could be useful to evolve towards a more associative cultural or sport forms, or maybe specialized in some type of criminal activity. So we start with a process of to make a selection of case studies for the comparative process based on this operational definition about youth street groups that we shared before. Therefore, after the ethnographic visits and the methodological meetings, it was decided by consensus that the ethnography of the youth street groups will concentrate on the main areas of marginalization. This means economical, political, and cultural in the region that lead to the appearance of this type of sociability. The three groups studied are informal street vendors, urban culture association, and subaltern youth group as Hittites in Algeria and Charmils in Morocco. So the selection of the cases can include youth groups with a behavior classified as deviant, often illegal or delegitimized in the region, such as the urban culture proposal. They can be the hip hoppers, graffitiers, and so on. But also the selection make it possible to distinguish youth street groups from organized crime or from transnational criminal organizations, including terrorist cells, but also from informal groups without a stable organization, grouped exclusively around leisure. This is the important thing. Our definition can be useful to research with this kind of groups and not criminalize them. So if we take a look at the indicators of the youth street group as it was proposed in our concept paper, each of the groups selected in the Maghreb meets at least 3 of the 5 conditions proposed for defining the group of study. First of one, the first indicator is the name. The group has a name. In the case of Maghreb, the names, not that the only groups engaged in cultural activities, such as the Tunisians members of a cultural association, have given themselves a name, which ascribes their identity as a political act in authoritarian situations. The second one, the external label, the second indicator, the external labels for denomination groups are usually imposed from the dominant narratives and constructed by the media, as in the case of Moroccan Charmil and Algerian Hittites, with the intention of marginalization, if not criminalization. The third indicator is an internal conscience. This is the existence or not of an internal conscience of a group is one of the questions that must be researched and traced for the conversation with the young members of the groups. This is an important issue that should be researched, because we don't have any kind of data on these questions in the contemporary literature. Four indicator, ordinary activities. This means that regarding the 4 groups, we find practices that unite them in solidarity based on their place of residence, as Charmil or Hittites, or in common practices, graffiters, hip hoppers, or graffiters, hip hoppers, or street vendors, as in the case I said. And the last indicator is a continuity over time for more than 1 year. And this means this is something more controversial in the region due to the peculiarities of the in the cities, because the continuity in time for more 1 year is difficult to find. Specifically, the spontaneous Maghreb youth street groups come together due to common interests, especially street vendors and the Charmil and Hittites. Thus, we are facing flexible groups in which members continuously enter and leave without establishing defined hierarchies. Only associative groups that perform cultural mediation practice are stable in both time and membership. Border spaces. This is a very important idea to understand that the space that that is occupied by young people in the Maghreb. Because after an in-depth reading of the background papers and other texts of preliminary analysis data, testifies that young members of street groups navigate in difficult circumstances caused by poverty, fragile economies, authoritarian and corrupt governments, globalism, and intergenerational struggles. Young people are extremely critical, frustrated, and sometimes overwhelmed by their impotence. In this context, each of the group researchers, combining the possibilities of the global and the local, construct spaces in a physical and symbolic time, which give them livelihoods, cultural practices, scenarios for political disruption, identity adscription, and individual dignity as a human being. And this is very important question related with the cultural ideas in the region. The idea of individual dignity in Arabic karama, it's very important to understand what are in the center of the street groups. So, by example, in the centers of the cultural association, in the SOCs, or in the neighborhoods, especially the spaces they construct in the neighborhoods, such as the Houma in Algeria, occupied by the Charmil Hahitis, are safe spaces where youth groups build their strategies to achieve their objectives, whether economic, cultural, or political. This specialization of youth street groups, which often do not renounce occupying the central spaces of the city or passively accept their marginalization, is a fundamental variable when exploring the conflicts and mediation that are generated in governance contexts that are, to a greater or lesser degree, authoritarian. This is very important also for the situation of youth street groups in the region, that they are living in this kind of governance context. So these border spaces are located on the margins of the social world, also in sometimes physically, so that subjects can think of themselves as subjects between two worlds. In this way, youth street groups constitute these in the region border spaces that use strategies from both the global world and the local memory and practices, conferring power to that space that young people re-signify as response spaces in the Maghreb. This is the case of an Algerian case that was explained by Kamel Bourchef and Mustafa Omran in the background paper, but also in the Moroccan case that was also explained by Rachid Touhtouh in the case of Rabat and Morocco, and always constitute as a disrupted or defiant political space. This could be discussed later with Rachid Touhtouh. There is, therefore, a social, political, and cultural occupation of the border that takes on a conjugation of different positions in the social structure, in the political space, and also in the process of cultural hegemony and counter-hegemony. Thus, according to the theoretical perspective of the Transgang project, we understand these spaces of sociability of youth group as border areas between the subaltern produced by modernization and colonization processes and the marginalization suffered that considers the members of youth groups as separate subjects who do not accept the options or conditions that are presented or imposed of them. So, only after this reading of the background paper and this short introduction to this session, I want to share with us some final question that was in my mind when I was reading these background papers. This is to take into consideration during the research process, because I think that is a very important questions that can be discussed by sharing the data of the three localizations. So the first is, are the moral panics of the Maghreb adult-centric dominant society and those who hold power over the Maghreb youth and therefore of sociability justified? Second one, when faced with a population that is perceived as problematic, that this is the case, we must ask ourselves, problematic for whom? Who defines the problem? This is also very important to understand exactly for who is a problem and for who is a solution to take part of a youth street group. And finally, what political, economic, or cultural or moral order perceive this group as disturbing? This is very important also to trying to understand what happens in the streets of this of the Maghrebian region. But in the middle of our research, as everybody knows so well, the erosion of the COVID-19 produced some some gaps in our research plan, and it's important trying to introduce some questions related directly with the presence and the situation caused by the pandemic situation. First of all, have public virtual spaces become essential for ensuring communication during the pandemic among the members in a seemingly safe and anonymous way, similarly to the communication exchanges that can take place in city centers? Second one, does the neighborhood continue to be the key mechanism for the formation of group and informal economic association during this pandemic situation? Third one, how does the new social control of what has been called the new reality affect youth street groups in the Maghreb? And the last one, what implications does social control by physical distancing have on the street logic of young people from marginalized neighborhood? This is some kind of questions that can be discussed after the presentation of Sihem Najar, Kamel Bourchef, and Rachid Touhtouh. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Jose, for your introduction and these considerations. Oh, I have a slide. This is better now. So we will continue with Sihem Najar, which will speak to us about the violence of young people and mediation processes in Tunisia. So Sihem, please go ahead. If you have any problems with the presentation, let us know. Thank you.
D'accord, merci. Je vais juste partager l'écran. Juste un instant. Merci beaucoup, José, pour cette présentation. Ça nous interpelle. Ça nous donne aussi des idées pour interpréter les données collectées. Alors, je vais juste... Non. Je pense qu'il va y avoir un problème. Voilà. Alors, je ne sais pas si vous arrivez à voir l'écran.
Oui.
Yes.
Très bien. Alors, donc, merci tout le monde pour m'avoir associé à cette rencontre. C'est une réunion de réflexion à partir du corpus qu'on a commencé à collecter. Donc, on a pour ce qui est du contexte tunisien, donc on a presque bouclé la collecte des données. Donc, je vais intervenir aujourd'hui sur une question qui concerne les jeunes et les expériences de marginalisation et d'exclusion en Tunisie. Donc, c'est une intervention qui se base sur une première lecture du corpus collecté par l'ensemble de l'équipe tunisienne qui porte sur donc trois groupes que je vais présenter, trois groupes de la rue que je vais avoir l'occasion de présenter maintenant. Alors, je suis désolée, mais là, visiblement, il y a un problème technique parce que j'arrive pas à avancer au niveau de… Est-ce que l'écran est visible?
Oh, Sihem,
Oui.
maybe it's better if you use. Do we have your presentation uploaded in the platform? I'm just wondering.
Parce que je ne suis pas sûre que l'écran est visible pour tout le monde.
Now we can see it. It's not as big enough. It's like a small screen we can see. But it's true because some seconds ago it was just black. So now we can see it.
D'accord, très bien. D'accord. Alors, donc, l'idée principale qui oriente mon intervention consiste à interroger les logiques qui sous-tendent des expériences de marginalisation et d'exclusion appréhendées en termes de résistance sociale. Donc, ces expériences de marginalisation et d'exclusion donc leur interprétation va à contre-courant des approches classiques qui considèrent que ces acteurs sont des victimes. Donc, on va aller au-delà de la victimisation de ces acteurs pour mettre l'accent sur leurs capacités et leurs compétences en matière de résistance sociale. Alors, pour commencer, je vais me baser sur l'analyse d'Axel Honneth, selon laquelle donc les mécanismes par lesquels les jeunes s'engagent dans un processus d'intérêt à l'émancipation qui viserait la destruction des asymétries et des exclusions sociales. Alors, d'abord, qu'est-ce que la marginalisation? La marginalisation est un processus complexe selon lequel l'individu se trouve en dehors des normes et valeurs sociales et du mode de vie dominant. S'écarter de l'ordre social établi avec ses différentes composantes implique un mode de vie en marge. La marginalisation stricto sensu est indissociable de l'exclusion sociale. C'est pour cette raison que mon intervention est basée sur ce processus de marginalisation et d'exclusion sociale. Mais faut-il souligner que rejeter un individu ou un groupe à la marge, c'est aussi le percevoir comme potentiellement dangereux. Donc, c'est pour cette raison que aborder ces groupes de jeunes est une aventure en quelque sorte parce que il y a une image qui est projetée vers ces groupes comme étant des groupes qui sont à la marge, qui posent pas mal de problèmes, qui aussi sont menaçants. Et cette image, elle est projetée et elle est assimilée, intériorisée également par ces jeunes eux-mêmes qui se considèrent également comme étant perçus comme des acteurs qui ne sont pas acceptés par la société. Et cela, bien évidemment, pose pas mal de problèmes au niveau aussi de la collecte des données auprès de ces acteurs. Alors, plusieurs facteurs sont générateurs de marginalisation et d'exclusion et ça se reflète également dans les discours de ces acteurs. Donc, tels que le manque de ressources matérielles, donc ces jeunes, dans leur majorité, sont issus de milieux pauvres, de milieux défavorisés. Il y a aussi le faible niveau scolaire, le genre. On sait également que les femmes sont exposées beaucoup plus que les hommes à la marginalisation et à l'exclusion sociale. On a pu repérer dans les jeunes ciblés quelques jeunes femmes donc qui sont doublement marginalisées et doublement exclues. Il y a aussi l'appartenance géographique, l'origine ethnique, l'appartenance religieuse, les problèmes de santé physique et mentale, etc. Cette marginalisation et cette exclusion, qui sont en fait une préférence pour l'inégalité, donc voulue, traversent les différentes formes d'appartenance sociale, économique, générationnelle, de genre, scolaire, culturelle, régionale, etc. Donc cette idée de préférence pour l'inégalité, elle a été développée par François Dubé dans un travail qui porte sur les inégalités sociales pour le contexte français, mais là aussi, pour ce qui concerne la société tunisienne, effectivement, il s'avère que la marginalisation et l'exclusion, et ça, les jeunes le disent, hein, c'est un peu voulu par plusieurs acteurs, hein, par les décideurs, par les catégories sociales dominantes, etc. Alors, encore faut-il souligner que la marginalisation constitue, comme l'a montré à juste titre Guy Rocher, un nouveau réservoir de contestation. En ce sens, les jeunes marginalisés développent des modes de critique et de protestation sociale, voire de nouvelles voies d'action qui leur permettent d'exprimer un quant à soi citoyen. La marginalisation renvoie à une vision dichotomique de l'ordre social. Donc, il y a le centre et la périphérie. Donc, généralement, ces jeunes, ces groupes de jeunes se situent par rapport à un centre. Pour ce qui est, je n'ai pas encore présenté les groupes ciblés, mais pour ce qui est des jeunes dans le secteur informel, ils se situent par rapport à l'économie globale, centrale, etc. Les groupes qui développent des compétences artistiques alternatives se situent par rapport au ministère de la Culture, par exemple, se situe par rapport aux artistes reconnus, mais également par rapport aux différentes institutions de l'État. On va voir comment l'un des groupes ciblés occupe un local qui est limitrophe au ministère de l'Intérieur. Donc, il y a toujours cette identification par rapport à un centre et il y a aussi cette déclaration d'appartenance à une périphérie. Mais il y a aussi d'autres types de dualité, de dichotomie, si vous voulez, qui est la normalité et la déviance. Donc, ces jeunes sont plutôt classés, catégorisés, typifiés comme étant des acteurs déviants, et puis donc la majorité, la minorité, etc. Et donc il y a bien évidemment d'autres types de dualité. On doit distinguer entre des expériences différentielles de la marginalisation et de l'exclusion. Il y a donc des jeunes qui tombent dans la criminalité, la déviance, la violence, l'extrémisme, la radicalisation, etc. Et donc qui voient leur vie détruite, hein, déstabilisée par ces formes d'exclusion sociale. D'autres donc, qui s'accommodent avec leur marginalisation en développant des actions sociales et des formes alternatives de créativité et d'imagination, telles que les expressions artistiques, les organisations collectives et solidaires, etc. Donc, finalement, il s'agit d'un processus donc, qui va de la marginalisation et l'exclusion qui sont imposées à une détermination pour prendre son destin en main et finalement pour arriver à vaincre la marginalisation et l'exclusion. Et c'est le cas des groupes qu'on a ciblés, donc qui sont exposés à des formes de marginalisation, qui développent des compétences en matière artistique, économique, etc. Et puis qui arrivent à vaincre cette marginalisation ou ces différentes formes de marginalisation. Alors maintenant, je vais passer à la présentation des groupes des jeunes de la rue qu'on a ciblés. Et il était, comme je l'ai dit je l'ai dit tout à l'heure, que ce sont les jeunes qui font face à la marginalisation et à l'exclusion sociale qui ont été ciblés dans le cadre de notre travail. Donc, on est loin de d'être dans la victimisation de ces groupes, on est loin de cibler des groupes qui ne sont pas, si vous voulez, en mesure de faire face à ce processus de marginalisation et d'exclusion sociale. Donc, nous avons ciblé 3 groupes de jeunes qui reflètent la diversité de la culture juvénile en pleine mutation dans un contexte post-révolutionnaire. Ces groupes, donc, sont les suivants. D'abord, les graffeurs. Donc, c'est un groupe qui est plus ou moins organisé, qui s'est développé notamment après la Révolution. Ça ne veut pas dire qu'il n'y avait pas de graffeurs avant la Révolution. On a même, dans le cadre de l'un des focus group, on a eu l'une des personnes ressources qui était elle-même donc graffeur avant la Révolution, mais ce groupe a pris une nouvelle forme après la Révolution. Et puis, il y a un deuxième groupe qui est le groupe de musique alternative Debo, qui est un collectif organisé qui occupe un local, contrairement aux graffeurs qui n'ont pas de local, hein, qui se réunissent un peu dans l'espace public, dans des cafés, dans des salons de thé, etc. Alors que ce groupe a été fondé par un jeune, rappeur qui a loué ce local, qui a fondé une association et qui a pu réunir maintenant autour d'une bonne cinquantaine, je pense, qui sont à peu près 70 personnes, 70 jeunes qui appartiennent à ce collectif. Et puis, le troisième groupe, c'est un groupe de jeunes dans le secteur informel, donc qui sont actifs au marché, donc au souk Mansf Bey. Et là, il s'agit d'un autre type de groupe, hein, qui est présent, hein, sur ce lieu qui est le souk Mansf Bey. Il y a beaucoup de jeunes qui sont très dynamiques, mais qui ne sont pas maintenant très accessibles. Et si vous voulez, on peut en parler. Pour quelles raisons maintenant ils deviennent de plus en plus hostiles, parce qu'il y a eu pas mal d'événements ces derniers mois qui ont fait que ils deviennent un peu hostiles et ne veulent pas répondre à nos questions. Alors, dans quelle mesure l'étude des groupes de jeunes, et notamment des groupes de la rue, est-elle pertinente aujourd'hui dans le contexte actuel des transformations sociopolitiques en Tunisie, avec, bien évidemment, tout ce que cela implique sur les plans économiques, culturels et symboliques, etc. Alors, plusieurs études sur les jeunes dans le contexte post-révolutionnaire en Tunisie ont mis l'accent sur 3 domaines critiques qui nécessitent une intervention et un traitement de fond. D'abord, l'accès à l'emploi. Donc ça, c'est l'un des domaines prioritaires d'intervention. Ensuite, donc l'engagement citoyen. Et le troisième domaine prioritaire, c'est la marginalisation des jeunes. Alors, pour ce qui est du premier domaine prioritaire, qui est l'accès à l'emploi, un rapport réalisé par le FNUAP révèle que 18% des jeunes sont inactifs et ne sont ni dans l'emploi, ni dans le travail, ni dans la formation. Cette catégorie de jeunes est la plus préoccupante et concerne plus de femmes que d'hommes. Cette situation est d'autant plus critique que le secteur informel attire de plus en plus de jeunes diplômés, et ça c'est une nouvelle donne, parce qu'avant, les jeunes qui sont actifs dans ce secteur informel étaient plutôt des jeunes analphabètes ou qui ont un niveau d'instruction très bas. Alors que maintenant, on voit de plus en plus la présence de jeunes diplômés et cela revient au désengagement de l'État et de ses institutions. Par ailleurs, donc 26,8% des jeunes âgés de 15 à 29 ans exercent dans des métiers peu qualifiés. sont des données qui sont présentées par le BIT, l'Observatoire national de l'emploi et des qualifications. Là, on a des photos qui présentent des jeunes dans le secteur informel et puis des jeunes donc dans des secteurs disqualifiés. Concernant les jeunes et l'engagement citoyen, qui est le deuxième domaine prioritaire, les différents travaux ont mis l'accent sur la dépolitisation et le désengagement citoyen des jeunes dû à la crise de confiance vis-à-vis des institutions politiques. Cependant, nous considérons que loin d'être désengagés, les jeunes ont tourné le dos à la politique comme parole instituée et instituante, comme scène et comme acteurs. Ils sont allés agir et parler ailleurs, ils sont allés expérimenter une autre parole à partir d'autres territoires, improvisés, reconquis ou tout simplement reconvertis aux causes d'un nouvel engagement. L'apathie face au mode conventionnel d'engagement est loin d'être une indifférence vis-à-vis de la chose publique. D'ailleurs, quand les jeunes parlent de leurs activités, même s'ils déclarent qu'ils ne sont pas intéressés par la chose publique, par la sphère politique, etc., eh bien, toutes les actions qu'ils mènent se situent en opposition par rapport au discours officiel, etc. Donc, finalement, c'est une autre manière de s'engager, de faire la politique, de produire un discours politique, et c'est une autre manière également de s'intéresser à la chose publique. Alors, s'agissant de la marginalisation des jeunes, qui est le troisième domaine prioritaire, l'idée principale qui sous-tend notre réflexion sur les groupes de jeunes de la rue est que notre société, à l'instar des sociétés contemporaines, est de plus en plus productrice de la marginalité et de l'exclusion. Le rapport sur l'inclusion sociale en Tunisie révèle que jusqu'à 2010, le taux d'emploi dans l'économie informelle était au voisinage de 40%. Les activités informelles se sont développées après la Révolution. Elles représentent aujourd'hui près de 50% du PIB et font employer 40,2% de la main-d'œuvre. C'est en tenant compte de ces trois champs d'intervention que nous considérons prioritaires que le traitement de la question de la jeunesse et la médiation, que nous envisageons l'analyse des groupes des jeunes sélectionnés. Alors, s'inscrivant dans l'esprit du projet Transgang, qui dépasse le modèle théorique dominant axé sur la criminalité des gangs, sur la criminalisation, si vous voulez, des gangs, notre travail se base sur une perspective qui envisage les groupes de jeunes en tant qu'agents de médiation et analyse les obstacles qui bloquent le rôle médiateur de ces jeunes considérés comme des catégories à problème. Cette perspective va à contre-courant de l'approche négativiste qui met l'accent sur les cas d'échec et d'exclusion sociale. Elle se penche plutôt sur l'analyse des cas réussis de groupes de jeunes et d'inclusion sociale en paix et médiation. Ainsi, dans les enquêtes que nous avons menées, l'accent a été mis sur les logiques qui animent les actions de jeunes et les compétences critiques dont ils sont dotés, leur permettant de dénoncer les différentes formes d'injustice et de revendiquer plus de visibilité. Là, ce sont quelques photos la première, c'est la production des graffeurs qu'on a interviewés. La deuxième a été conçue par le groupe Debo dans le cadre d'une manifestation qu'ils ont organisée. Donc là, on va un état de conscience et c'est une campagne pour lutter contre la violence à l'égard des femmes. Alors, une première lecture du corpus collecté auprès des jeunes ciblés révèle que les expériences de marginalisation et d'exclusion, voire du mépris, sont ancrées dans des situations sociales d'inégalité et de domination plus larges. La dualité sexuelle, l'appartenance socio-économique, l'origine géographique, biologique ou politique, etc. Plus précisément, pardon ? Alors, plus précisément, donc c'est en tant que membre d'un groupe de statut que les jeunes filles et garçons se considèrent comme victimes d'invisibilité sociale, de marginalisation et d'exclusion, bref, des inégalités, des opportunités. Alors, maintenant, je passe à la présentation des différentes manifestations de la marginalisation et de l'exclusion. Donc, les données empiriques collectées révèlent que l'on assiste à une reconfiguration de la réalité sociale de manière générale et de la réalité des jeunes en particulier. Cette réalité de la Tunisie post-révolutionnaire, qui passe par une phase charnière dans son histoire contemporaine, se présente comme suit. D'abord, l'invisibilité sociale dont souffrent les jeunes dans plusieurs sphères, médiatiques, politiques, économiques, familiales, etc. Cela se manifeste à travers l'exclusion des jeunes de la sphère économique. Alors l'un des jeunes du souk Mansouf Bey affirme « L'autre jour, j'ai aimé ce qu'a dit un spécialiste en économie en parlant du Nord-Est. L'État est absent là-bas, laissez-les se nourrir. Pourquoi est-ce que vous les puniriez pour ça ?» Un autre jeune affirme « Non, mon ami, non, il n'y a ni corona ni rien, les médias exagèrent, regarde les gens n'ont rien, c'est juste qu'ils ne veulent plus nous laisser travailler dans ce pays. » Donc là, il s'agit d'un discours qui montre comment ces jeunes se sentent exclus par l'État et ses institutions de la sphère économique. Donc, ils déclarent qu'ils veulent travailler, mais qu'ils n'ont pas l'opportunité de le faire. Un deuxième aspect concerne la croissance du chômage chez les jeunes, et ça, c'est visible et ça devient de plus en plus lourd. Et puis, l'image négative et dévalorisante véhiculée par les médias. Alors là aussi, il y a un discours très critique vis-à-vis des médias. Donc, les différents jeunes qu'on a rencontrés adressent des critiques virulentes aux médias traditionnels parce qu'ils considèrent que les jeunes sont présentés par les médias traditionnels essentiellement comme victimes et comme une proie facile pour les mouvements extrémistes et par conséquent, ils représentent un danger pour le pays. Donc, c'est pour cette raison qu'ils sont critiqués par les jeunes qu'on a interviewés. Par ailleurs, les jeunes interviewés considèrent que les médias cherchent leurs propres intérêts. L'un des jeunes de Debout affirme « Les médias vivent par et pour le business. Ils exploitent certains artistes du hip-hop aussi longtemps qu'ils rapportent de l'argent sans se soucier du phénomène et de l'art en général. » Un autre membre de Debout va dans le même sens en considérant que les médias ne servent pas la cause de la bonne culture, mais celle de la culture commerciale. D'ailleurs, les libertés conquises par les médias après la Révolution a ouvert la porte à des phénomènes futiles. On cherche le buzz, on veut ridiculiser tel artiste, on l'invite à telle émission pour mettre en valeur telle médiocrité. Tout cela ne les sert d'aucune façon. Un jeune graffeur déclare « En Tunisie, les médias classiques nous négligent. On aurait aimé voir la radio et la télévision s'intéresser à nous. Sinon, comme tous les graffeurs en Tunisie ou dans le monde, on a Instagram ou Facebook. » Donc, il s'adresse plutôt à des médias alternatifs. Une jeune graffeur affirme « Les médias tunisiens ne cherchent que le buzz. Tant que tu n'as rien qui crée le buzz, donc ça veut dire qu'on est exclu si on ne crée pas le buzz. Il y a des gens qui ont eu des prix à l'étranger, de grands diplômes, et personne ne se soucie d'eux. Donc là aussi, c'est un problème de méconnaissance de la part des médias à l'égard des jeunes. D'autres jeunes graffeurs préfèrent plutôt être invisibles. Donc là aussi, c'est une autre stratégie. Dans le monde entier, il n'y a pas, là c'est un graffeur qui parle, dans le monde entier, il n'y a pas de grands échanges entre médias et graffeurs, car le graffeur n'a pas intérêt à être visible et connu. En fait, je ne sais pas ce que je pourrais faire demain comme coup. Regardez le rap, le rappeur est connu, mais le compositeur ou celui qui prépare l'arrière-plan de la scène, qui est le graffeur, n'est pas aussi connu. Là, une autre manifestation de ces formes de marginalisation et d'exclusion, c'est le surgissement de légitimité conflictuelle ou antagonique et d'une certaine rhétorique d'opposition. Alors, il est vrai que les jeunes souffrent d'un déni de reconnaissance de la part des adultes, mais il n'en demeure pas moins que les jeunes eux-mêmes ne reconnaissent pas la valeur de leurs aînés qui agissent dans les différentes sphères. Il s'agit d'une méconnaissance réciproque. Là aussi, on a trouvé dans le corpus, donc ce qui ressort de cette première lecture, c'est ce conflit intergénérationnel. Qu'il s'agisse des jeunes dans le secteur informel ou des jeunes graffeurs ou de Debout, il y a une critique adressée aux adultes, enfin aux personnes plus âgées, aux parents. Enfin, ça peut être un parent, ça peut être un prof, ça peut être un acteur politique, etc. Donc, il y a donc ce positionnement par rapport à l'autre génération. Chaque génération se définit par opposition à une autre génération. Ainsi, donc, les jeunes procèdent à une construction d'une identité d'opposition qui se base sur le rejet de l'autre, donc les vieux. D'une telle situation, il en résulte une véritable crise de transmission entre générations. Les aînés déplorent l'incompétence des jeunes et dénoncent leur immaturité, alors que ces derniers se jugent écartés, voire exclus par une génération qui ne supporterait pas des concurrents. Une autre manifestation donc, de ce processus de marginalisation, c'est le processus d'identification qui se base de plus en plus sur la comparaison sociale. Les jeunes donc, se définissent non pas par ce qu'ils sont, mais par rapport aux autres, les adultes, les aînés, les jeunes qui appartiennent à d'autres catégories socio-économiques et à d'autres régions, etc. Donc, il y a en quelque sorte un processus d'identification qui se base beaucoup plus au groupe de pairs et par opposition donc à ces adultes qui sont considérés comme étant presque des adversaires, hein, parce que des adversaires, c'est parce que ils dénigrent un tout petit peu, ils stigmatisent les jeunes et rejettent leurs activités. Alors, quel est l'aboutissement de la marginalisation et de l'exclusion? D'abord, une crise de confiance marquée envers l'État, ses représentants, ses institutions, y compris les médias, et l'action publique. Donc là, c'est une crise qui est confirmée, affirmée, etc. Et puis, une crise de reconnaissance généralisée. Et là, on peut émettre l'hypothèse qu'il existerait un rapport de causalité entre la crise de confiance et la crise de reconnaissance. Cette crise de reconnaissance est le résultat de la crise de gouvernance, donc l'État, en l'occurrence, qui, selon les jeunes, n'est pas capable de faire face aux problèmes sociaux, le chômage, l'injustice sociale, les inégalités régionales, l'immigration clandestine, etc. Et cette crise, donc, a fait que l'État ne jouit plus de reconnaissance sociale et voit sa légitimité menacée suite au scepticisme envers ces différentes institutions. Deuxièmement, la crise institutionnelle. Les propos des jeunes expriment le déclin des institutions, les médias, l'école, l'administration, les partis politiques, l'État en général, etc. Il en résulte donc une sorte de défiance plus ou moins accentuée envers ces différentes institutions. Et puis, la crise de citoyenneté. Cette crise se manifeste d'une part au niveau du comportement des jeunes, donc la majorité des jeunes rencontrés donc désertent les élections, ne signent pas des pétitions, ne s'intéressent pas au mouvement protestataire, et d'autre part à travers le bilan qu'ils donnent de leur environnement économique et sociopolitique. Donc ils ont développé un discours très critique à l'égard de la société et ses composantes en général, donc l'absence de déclaration fiscale, la corruption, la violence et l'agressivité, la destruction des biens publics, etc. Alors, ces différents éléments nécessitent des interventions urgentes pour résoudre les différents problèmes liés à la violence, au terrorisme, à l'exclusion économique, aux inégalités sociales, bref, aux différentes formes de marginalisation et d'exclusion liées au genre, à l'appartenance régionale, à l'identité générationnelle, à la situation socio-économique, etc. Donc, suite aux rencontres qu'on a eues dans le cadre des focus group, la rencontre avec les personnes ressources, mais aussi suite à la discussion avec les jeunes dans ces différents domaines que je viens d'indiquer, on a pu quand même repérer quelques acteurs qui peuvent jouer le rôle de médiateur et qui ont déjà eu l'expérience de jouer ce rôle. L'une des personnes rencontrées nous a parlé d'une expérience faite par une association qui a développé le théâtre, ce qu'ils appellent le théâtre des démunis, c'est-à-dire qu'ils organisent des rencontres avec les jeunes pour résoudre un certain nombre de problèmes qu'ils rencontrent avec avec l'État et ses institutions, et notamment avec les policiers dans la zone frontalière avec l'Algérie. Il y a eu, par exemple, une rencontre qui a consisté à demander aux jeunes de jouer une pièce de théâtre devant le poste de police pour évoquer une scène de violence entre ces jeunes et des policiers. Et donc c'était devant les policiers eux-mêmes, et ce membre de cette association nous a dit que ça a fonctionné très bien, et qu'il y a eu par la suite une discussion entre ces jeunes et les policiers qui était, comme vous le savez, donc une relation plutôt un peu conflictuelle, on va dire. Il y a d'autres expériences qui ont été évoquées dans des quartiers chauds. L'un des quartiers qui est le Nil, c'est un quartier chaud en Tunisie, où une maison de jeunes a pu coopter des jeunes violents dans le quartier, et en les encourageant à faire des activités telles que les graffitis, le rap, etc. Donc ça a permis d'apaiser un tout petit peu les tensions au sein de ce quartier. Et les jeunes eux-mêmes, tels que des acteurs au sein du groupe Debout, qui ont pu également convaincre un certain nombre de jeunes d'exercer un certain nombre de pratiques artistiques, ce qui leur a permis un tout petit peu de se confirmer, de développer un certain nombre de compétences. Et ça, donc, je pense que voilà, il y a des expériences comme ça qu'on peut découvrir à partir du corpus qu'on a collecté. Voilà, donc je vous remercie de votre attention. Si vous avez des questions à poser, donc on pourra les discuter par la suite.
Thank you so much, Sihem, for your presentation. It was really interesting. So we have to keep in mind that we have to close this session at 6, and also it's Friday afternoon here in Europe at least. So I invite now Kamel to do his presentation on border spaces and youth, and he will talk about Huma and Hitistas, if I say this right. Kamel, you know how to share your presentation. You have on the right side, you have a button that you can open, a lila one, and there on the bottom, the third option is to share content. So you can share your content if you have a presentation.
Do you hear me?
Yes.
Neil, do you hear me?
Yes, we hear you.
Yes. Hello, Rachid. I have no PowerPoints because I just don't know how to make the PowerPoint. So I'm gonna talk about my paper.
Okay, perfect. Go ahead.
Okay, okay. Thank you very much. So everybody is hearing me, is it?
Yes, we hear you fine.
Thank you. Okay, now I'm gonna talk about the border spaces in youth in Maghreb, and not only in Algeria, just because I wanted to see what we share together, because as Maghrebi societies, we share so many things.
Kamel,
so,
just a question.
Yeah.
Sorry, but
Yeah.
is it possible that you activate your camera so we can see you?
Yeah. Is it activated now?
I think it's working. Sometimes it takes a minute. Yes, I think now we can see you. Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, it is. So you have the picture and the sound.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So my paper is aims to analyze border spaces experienced by groups of young people at the level of the three societies of the Center Maghreb, Morocco, Algeria, and Tunisia. The analysis we present is based exclusively on data included in the background papers of the three countries, as well as the results of the Sahwa study carried out in the same countries in 2015, but we added the first data from the ethnographic investigation we had so far. So the first thing I'd like to talk about is the context. In which context does the phenomenon, youth phenomenon, let's say, or a street group, street youth groups phenomenon happen? So about that, I'd like to say that the lasting economic crisis and the difficulties inherent in relaunching economic growth experienced by the three Central Maghreb countries take place in the context of economic liberalism, which forces states to withdraw from their social policy, thereby sowing poverty and precariousness among large sections of the population. In the Maghreb, the socio-economic landscape has often been the theater of riots and popular uprising as a reaction of the different layers of the population to the unpopular measures of the economic liberalism of the states, in particular through the reduction of subsidies allocated to primary products. The confrontations which take place appear as a response of the poorest social strata to the austerity measures taken, in many cases dictated and supported by the international financial organizations, when it is not the structural changes that are imposed. However, it should be noted that if the system of social and economic governance of the states of Central North Africa tends to exclude and marginalize the poor sections of the population, young people often find themselves at the heart of a contradiction for the less extremely difficult to overcome. This contradiction is this: on the one hand, a significant demographic weight in society, and on the other, the inadequacy and inefficacy of youth policy, which leave many young people by the wayside without a social perspective. The main problem I'd like to talk about here is when we talk about the border spaces, is the youth unemployment. It is, first of all, the lack of employment opportunities for young people that is at the root of their disenchantment or of their despair, if you want, in their of building their autonomy. This places the issue of employment at the center of the concerns of young people in the Maghreb. The latter, I mean the Maghreb, has some, this is very important, the latter has some of the highest youth unemployment rates in the world, thus failing to get a job in the social inclusion project. The latter turns to informal economic activities. Just now, Sihem was talking about that. So the latter turns into formal economic activities in order to ensure their survival. It must be said here that the informal sector of the economy has become an important creator of employment. In Tunisia, for example, 40% of the jobs created are in the formal sector of the economy. Another striking fact concerning access to employment in Maghreb societies is that which relates to the place and role of social or relational capital, and which represent a challenge to all formal recruitment procedures at all levels. Moreover, the border space of young Maghreb people at this level had reached such a level that it stands as a persistent threat to the very existence of the institutional arrangement and coherence, as well as the system of social cohesion. We mean by that the unemployment of university graduates, with its devastating impact on young people's representation of social success and access to the stage of autonomy or empowerment, if you want. We will then understand why young people insist in their demand for access to fair employment in the light of young university graduates in Morocco who organized themselves into a national association called ANCDR, which fights for the recruitment of young graduates, as is also the case for young people in different categories from the city of Ouargla in Algeria, and who were claiming a job when the jobs resulting from the exploitation of the wealth of the subsoil were benefiting to foreign applicants to their city. Also, in a more sectoral conception of the issue of educational success among young people, one should mention the intervention of the gender variable, which creates a clear differentiation between boys and girls to the benefit of the latter, and which is used to mediate on two important points. First, the place of school in social success among young people. Second, the place and role of schooling in addressing the gender issue in Maghreb societies. The point I'd like to talk about is the issue of informal youth activities and its relation with the state institutions. Economic informality among young people doesn't solve the problem of employment, nor consequently the question of their status in society as a whole. Indeed, if undertaking informal economic activities represents a palliative for the lack of opportunities in this context and to guarantee the means of survival, the latter is practiced at the level of public space. Between brackets, I mentioned the border space, which is contested place and generates conflict. The case of the young Mohamed Bouazizi in Tunisia, who died after immolation following the confiscation of his merchandise by law enforcement officers, as well as the death of the fisherman merchant in northern Morocco after the seizure of his merchandise, and which was at the origin of the social movement of Rif Hirak in Morocco, are illustrative examples that generate the feeling of injustice among young people as well as the ephemeral nature of maintaining social peace. Informal economic activities, although they are not systematically synonymous with precariousness and indecency at work, they are not, however, immune to the impact of social, political, and economic conditions which determine the implementation of the left hand or the right hand of the state, and by the same, to reveal the relationship of young people to institutions. The informal economic activities of young people are concentrated almost exclusively in trade or commerce, a very simple economic activity, easy to carry out, and which boils down to gleaning a profit by buying and selling a product. Thus, to be effective, these activities largely depend on the type of product, their availability, their attractiveness, and above all, on the profit margin to be achieved when the prices of the same project pass from an economic system to another. In this way, it becomes easy to understand why informal activities were or are flourishing at the borders between the Maghreb countries, in particular between Algeria and Morocco, and Algeria and Tunisia. They are informal exchange networks that supply and bring to life an entire border economy. However, this is a type of trade that is not limited to the Maghreb geographical area, as it is spread to Southern Europe and Asia. This is what is commonly referred to in this community as El Kaba system. El Kaba is an Algerian Maghreb colloquial name. In this context, products from Turkey are an essential reference. In this case, it should be noted that the spread in our societies of activities that take place outside legal and organizational frameworks, in particular those undertaken by young people, represent a privileged means of combating their marginalization. It is for this purpose that the question of urban space as an economic and political issue intervenes to give meaning to the actions of young people. Indeed, the groups of young people improvise and appropriate spaces of economical exchange to make of them spaces of exercise of their activities, as it is the case of the Souk Mansour Bey of Tunis or that of Bajarrah in Algiers, among many others, in many urban centers and on the outskirts of large cities. It is in the street as an open space which houses informal activities that the latter are organized when the occupants of these spaces simultaneously combine neighborhood, al-huma, we say that in Maghreb, and precisely in Algeria we call this huma, acquaintance, home, economic activities, in a harmonious whole that is intended to be secure and reassuring, because knowing very well that their presence on these places is very often at the origin of dispute with policemen. It is for this reason that we can assume that through their occupation of places, young people impose a type of relation on the state and its institutions. This is how the street becomes an issue and the space of confrontation, in the sense that young people, the haters and the need, use it as a means to fight against their marginalization and their exclusion when their representative of public power invited to impose their multidimensional hegemony. let's talk, I'm talking now about stigmatization, but I'd like to go straight forward because we don't have enough time. I'd like to go straight forward to how do young people react to their marginalization. I call this reactions of young people to their marginalization and exclusion. The social inclusion of a large part of young people with a view to their autonomy in Maghreb societies is a social phenomenon that economic, social, and political conditions make difficult. For this category of the population, failing to be the recipient of an inclusive youth policy, they will experience a situation of impasse which jeopardizes any prospect of inclusion in society. They will live on the margins of society in search of informal or even illicit avenues capable of replacing the process of disenchantment. Feeling therefore marginalized and excluded, they will think of ways to break with an inconsistent reality and paralyzing and distressing experience. They will either try to leave the area, hoping to find a more welcoming land, or become part of perspective or collective action to resist the same marginalization. This is how young people develop a multitude of ways of expressing their reaction to their marginalization caused by a difficult and hostile context, among which adhering to collective action seems to be the appropriate attitude to adopt, an action which in some cases may have the aspect of desocialization by virtue of the break with the initial institution of socialization. In this case, the search for spaces to compensate for sociability among young people encourages them to form groups on the scale of the most immediate and most operational spatial dimension, the neighborhood. We call it al-huma. A real and symbolic al-huma, which is a real and symbolic space at the same time, and particular for young people, hatis or need, whose vacancy rarifies the network of social relations to reduce it to its natural scale, insofar as it takes place in accordance with the capital relational resulting from the trajectory of course of life of the individual. We understand then why it presents itself as the adequate response to the almost embarrassing emergence of the phenomenon of social and racial isolation. On the other hand, in the field of economic activity, the network of social relationships is used to generate relationships of trust, respect, and other, which arise from neighborly, parental, family, generational, or ethnic, and which are not those on which the economic relations between individuals are generally, between brackets, formally built. A type of social logic which organizes the economic act that we have seen among the gold sellers in Algiers, and which is not limited to the exchange sphere as such, but extends to all aspects of the trade of gold seller. This leads us to ponder the functionality of the relationship between the economic act and the social bond or the social link. However, it is not the only way to resist the phenomenon of marginality among young people. The reaction of their situation of exclusion is without appeal. Okay, now what's his name? Jose told me that he's got the paper I was reading. So let me finish with this couple of ideas I'd like to say. Is that the reactions I was talking about the marginalization, how do young people react to marginalization? It's not only economic. It is. It could be cultural. It could be artistic. And it could be religious. The problem is that when people this way, like graphers, hip hop people, heavy metal, and so on, they are denied for at least two reasons. The first reason is that this kind of behavior, this kind of culture is foreign to our societies. It is important from Occidental society, so it is not our culture. And about that, Rachid Touhtouh was talking about satanic music they were talking about in Morocco. The second thing is that according to the text they spread, most of the time these groups are taken for being transgressive and subversive groups, and some of them are put in prison. So when they react to their marginalization, some of them lose their freedom. It is at the price of their freedom. Now, as Sihem was talking before me, she was talking about the social recognition of the institution. I'm talking about the same thing, but I'm talking about social recognition among young people, which is not a reality, but is either it is mostly problematic and hypothetical. So why marginalization exists when compared to social recognition of young people? It is because we put the hypothesis that youth policy couldn't meet youth expectations in Maghreb society so far. This is the first conclusion. The second conclusion about the social recognition is that the youth claiming are not just material. They are not just material. They are cultural, and that's why sometimes they develop dangerously a sort of subculture. So I say that if we want to be able to grasp the meaning of youth action, we should put them within the context where they take form. I point here to a methodological point of view, that if you want to understand the meaning of the action youth people take, it should be put within its own context. Let's take the example of this Tunisian girl who is a grapher.
Sorry to interrupt. I'm really sorry. It's really.
Let me just.
But just to maybe slowly finish, to leave some time for Rachid to present his. Yeah,
okay,
is that okay for you? Okay. Because we are running out of time.
I wanted just a minute, Neil. I wanted just a minute to finish. Okay.
Go
Can
ahead,
you give me a minute?
Yes, of course, of course.
Okay, thank you very much. I would like to point to this example of this Tunisian girl, which is very important. She is a grapher, and her father told her that is to be grapher is a man thing. So the conclusion is about this example. And there is in our societies a very big generational gap. It is not only political, it is social as well. This is the first thing. The second thing is that this girl who does graffiti is wearing a veil, and she insists too much about how to conceal a veil, the wearing of the Muslim veil with a religious connection, and the practice of graffiti. I think that these two examples are very meaningful in our problematic. Thank you very much, Neil.
Thank you so much, Kamel. Sorry for...
Thank you very much. Thank you.
And Rachid, we are happy to hear you now. So go ahead and tell us about the youth street groups in Morocco. Thank you.
I'm ready. Thank you, Nili. I will just share share files. Share now. Okay. Tell me, do you hear me well?
Yes, we hear you well.
Do you see the slides?
No, but if you want, I can open it for you.
Yes, please.
And then you can use the... Okay. And you should be able to move with the arrows.
Yeah? Yeah, without wasting time. They have taken, I think, 1 hour and 43 minutes to talk. Anyway, I'll try to be as quick as possible. So my presentation is about the Moroccan case. So it's within the framework of TRANSGANG research project and the first session, I guess, of comparative perspectives on youth street groups in the Maghreb. I will talk about the Moroccan case. So my presentation is in harmony with what José has said, and it is within the framework of TRANSGANG, of course, taking the specificity of Morocco in the Maghreb country. So this is a recent photo I took during the observation phase, where there are a lot of young people hanging around in streets in Sidi Moussa and smoking drugs. So despite the change from a normal life to a COVID-19 situation, still young people resist the authorities, you know, quarantine decisions, or not to be in street. So I named these groups, or I named these groups as youth street groups in Morocco, and I will specify their names. And for me, the locus or the micro resistance space is the Zanqa, as we say in the Maghreb, I'm sure in Algeria and Tunisia. So Zanqa for me as a space of resistance where the young people produce countercultures, where they search for social visibility and maybe social recognition. For me, my critical perspective is from within the subculture and post-colonial studies, where I posit youth as producers of resistance cultures in the case of Morocco, and it can be extended, I guess, to Middle East and North African movements. So here, my perspective is that for me, social movements, as classically defined or as we know them, for me, they are very elitist groups of resistance, because social movements as organized groups or as organized structures, they need connections, they need social mobility, and they need social status. For the groups we work on, we frame them within the non-social movements category, theorized by Asif Bayat in his book Life and Politics. if you want more details, it's in the background paper. So non-social movements in this case for us are available to marginalized youth student groups, especially in isolated neighborhoods, Shomat, as Kamel said, or in Zanqaz, because it's the opposite of social movements. They don't need connections, they don't need social mobility, and they don't need social status. So you can be anyone and you can participate in the non-social movement. The embodiment of these groups in the case of Morocco is the famous character of Bouzbel, which is a famous cartoon series that you can find in YouTube. And Bouzbel literally means the father of trash. So these are disposable humans that survive in isolated Zanqaz and neighborhoods, but they want social mobility and they want to get out of their marginalization. Because during the research, symbols and signs are very important, as Jose said, and in this case, dress and hairstyle are at the first signs of resistance. Just to tell you one story that happened in Morocco, and this is like the beginning of Charmil movement in Morocco. There was a young person with a strange quote-unquote hairstyle according to the authorities. And then there is a local qaid, which is the local representative of the Ministry of Interior in a place called Sidi Btash in the southern part of Rabat that attacked the person and cut his hair, because the hair symbolizes a form of resistance to the mainstream culture in this city, and it becomes a symbol of resistance. And this person, unfortunately, committed suicide, and then there was a big scandal in Morocco, and the qaid was jailed. By the way, this has been also a part of a book published by the late Fatima al-Mernisi on violence of the young people. It happened in 2014. So it was a signal that Charmil, or the expression of Charmil in Morocco, for the young people who call themselves Charmilin or Charmil, is a form of resistance to the mainstream culture in the case of Morocco. Of course, this is signs that, as Kamel and Sihem and Jose said, that there is a problem of of the youth category in the case of the Maghreb, as well as all over the world. And for me, I contextualize this research as a post-Arab Spring context, where young people have invaded streets, though officially, have invaded Zanqaz to call for karama, dignity, and social status. So this is the young people of the 20th February movement that is our Arab Spring version in the case of Morocco. Of course, there is the Hirak of the Reef movement, and this is also copyright. It's my picture during the Hirak of the Reef movement that Kamel mentioned, where we have also the explosion of the ethnic Berber movement that's called for karama, also dignity. So there is the proliferation of these social movements that are organized, of course, as I said, but at the margin of these social movements, there is the emergence of non-social movements, which is the category we are interested in, and I'm just giving you the context here. Of course, we have made our choice in the court case of Casablanca Rabat in Morocco on three categories of youth with groups. The first one is the Ultras, which is the Casablanca Raja Ultra group. And the second group is the Tamil movement in Sali, Sidi Moussa. And the third one is the street performers or the metal in the city of Rabat. So as you see and as you heard or read in the Arab world, there has been this phenomena of the ultras, what I call here as a non-social movement, where there is a mixture of football, ganging, and agency. In fact, there has been two phases of ultra evolution in the case of Morocco. The first phase has been a phase where there is violence in the streets, violence at the margin of stadium before and after the end of matches, and where the police interfere also violently against this. And then there has been a moment where the Ministry of Interior published an article banning all the ultras in Morocco. And then there was a reaction from the ultras, and that's the moment we are now in, is where they call for a form of institutional of ultra fans in the case of Morocco, but with a flavor of politics. And we've seen or we've heard or we listened to the famous song "The Blooded Lemoni." Like in my country, they have I don't have rights. And then the ultras started singing and chanting like social, political, economic problems that suffer from society, and then they use the stadium as a space where to vehicle this their political quote unquote views. And then we started looking at this new phenomena. Of course, violence has not disappeared, and in the last 3 years, violence has also proliferated, with especially with different groups, Raja or with Adfan, or the Black Army in Rabat, where it presents the military. So whenever these are young marginalized groups are in the street, there is violence. The focus of our research is on the Sultan, which is at the heart of the old Medina in Casablanca, and where it has witnessed the birth of the Ultra Raja fan group. Unfortunately, because of the COVID situation, I stopped the observation and the research, but I hope we continue this. That's an example of the Green Boys typhus, okay, representing the color green and representing their own. You can imagine they use all, so there are pictures, they use Joker, you know, the character from the movie. Also, what is interesting is the linguistic medium, like English is gaining ground in the case of the ultras, and where English becomes the language of expressing their maybe the refusal of a political culture or a problem. This is Sidi Moussa Theater, so I call it Sidi Moussa Theater. It's another ultra fun which dominates the Rabat Sali place of the Black Army, and where like every Saturday and Sunday, where we have a meeting, a football meeting, you can enjoy these things. And sometimes it turns violent, sometimes it becomes peaceful. What is interesting, as I said, is this evolution from a simple ultra fun where nobody has cared about to a non-social movement that really makes the difference in the weekend, and then Mondays all the newspapers will talk about it. So there is more maybe, and maybe that's my hypothesis, more organized political group trying to infiltrate among this fun groups in order to guide them into the political theater, because of the closure, what I call the closure of the political space in Morocco, especially post 2018, after the Hirak of the Reef and after the online boycott. So the closure of the political space has given birth to these non-social movements at the margin of institutional politics, where young people cannot reach institutional politics. So Sharmil, when I started doing observation and the first interviews we conducted so far, I called Sharmil as class in itself, and this I was inspired by a famous play written in 1926 by Shane O'Casey. It's called The Plough and the Star, where there is a character, Rosie Redmond, who said, whoring is a class in itself. So looking at whores as a social class. And I say here Sharmil as class in itself, where I have to direct the zooming into Sharmil young people who we look at them as marginalized or as problematic in society, but this is a class. It can be a social class, an economic class, it can be a political class in itself. So what I call humans of Sidi Moussa, these are young and poor people facing the Atlantic Ocean and far from the capital, about 30 minutes. Behind walled ancient sails of corsairs. You know, Sally was famous for La République des Corsaires, like the you know, the corsairs in English or in French. I think they have the same. Dreaming of a stable life, job, and respect from society. Zanqa Zero. You know, the architectural structure of Sidi Moussa is they have zankas, and it's zanka from 0 to 14. So 14 zankas, small zankas. Even streets here do not have a name. So they don't, even the municipality did not bother themselves to name the streets, you know, like normal old cities. So when you go and talk to the young, they say, I live in Zanqa 0, I live in Zanqa 1, I live in, do you know that person from Zanqa 13 or Zanqa 14, which is the last one? So numbered humans with no labels and name, which Zanqa you live in, answer from 0 to 14, each narrow street faces the Atlantic for escape, or you get stuck if you turn back on the Atlantic. So to imagine it's narrow streets from 0 to 14. One is facing one side is facing the Atlantic, one side is facing the street, and then you are torn between escaping the Zankas or you get stuck in the Zankas. For the escape, the social escape, or what we call in the Transgang the social mediation, I have examples of these two cases I work on. Zakaria, that you see in the street, is trying to get Sidi Moussa Sharmil young people from the street, and I name it "Do Not Live Street to Street." So he's a very a sportsman person who trains young people for free in the street of Sidi Moussa, in the streets of Sidi Moussa, without any compensation financial. Another one is Ayoub. So Ayoub has become famous now, like a lot of electronic newspapers talk about him. So this is a person who is a graduate from the Chamsi Circus School. Hosni knows the circuit school next to Sidi Moussa, where this NGO takes homeless young people and train them to become circus players and performers. But because this person has family has broken, so his father has divorced his mother and he lives by himself, and then he has to beg, you know, in the street, in Sidi Moussa, which is, we have Carrefour. So for me, this is a picture of a street performance, but looking for social visibility. But behind the costume is a young man who is looking for some money to pay the rent and eat in front of a new liberal example of globalization. So I think that, and I think this is the last, so I've tried to talk as quick as possible, not to stay an obstacle between you and your weekend, but I'm ready for any question and I can go any further. Shukran, gracias, guys.
Thank you so much, Rachid, and thanks for being so brief. Let me.
I was obliged.
You were obliged. You're right. This is always the risk, being the last one, and
Exactly.
we were just talking. The next time we will do it better, and yes, that
Maybe the first one.
Yeah. Yes, exactly, exactly. So, sorry?
To revenge.
Exactly, revenge. So we already exceeded our time, but it would be really nice to share some comments, some questions together. I think this was a really great summary, and to get into context, all of us, in the different case studies in North Africa. So maybe, yeah, maybe Jose has a question or wants to comment something, or somebody else, please go ahead. You can go via chat and ask your questions, or you can also activate your microphone, your camera, and just go ahead.
Yes.
Jose?
Okay.
Oh.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yeah, go on. Go on.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. No, only thank you very much for the presentations that Sihem, Rachid, and Kamel shared with us, and I think that we are working in the same way, from the marginalization, from the resistance, and for the economic reasons also of this kind of grouping in North Africa. And I think that this is the start of a very important task that we are trying to implement the next 2 years in the project, about the data collection and also the analysis. Only to express another time my gratitude for all the people that are connected here. And if you want, I share the paper of the Kamel with us via email, and say, if you have any kind of comment to this paper on other questions that was in our presentations, okay, you are feel free to send me an email, and I share the email with the different speakers. So nothing more, and I expect your comments and questions.
Yes, Carlos?
Yeah. Is it now or later? Can we make comments now, Jose? I can't hear you.
Kamel, wait your time. Wait your time, and it's the time of Carlos.
Yes.
It's the turn of Carlos. Okay.
All right.
You can answer at the end all the comments and questions. It will be easier first, that the attendants will can say some comments, and then at the end the 4 presenters. First of all, thank you very much, Jose, Kamel, Sihem, and all the people that present today. It has been the first step of regional comparison, and I have two comments. First, the papers will be published soon in the TRANSGANG working paper series, but also we have sent the call for papers into international journals, and we hope that what today has been presented will be deeper published there. Second, I think there are many points in common in the three countries regarding street youth groups. I have noted, for instance, the role of informal economy, street youth groups as a way of subsistence, to economic subsistence. Second point is the disengagement after the Arab Spring, and the street groups as a way to express a kind of generational gap. And third issue, the two phases of youth streets group. On one side, the political and religious extremism, the fear on the risk of extremism, versus the cultural creativity and the possibilities of mediation and creativity in the three cases you have studied. Finally, I am very interested in the concept of non-social movement that Rachid explained. Maybe, in my opinion, it would be better to change in the concept of social non-movements, because they are street groups. Street youth groups are social. What they are not, what this is not clear is that there are very different social situation on the classical social movements. So maybe it's better to talk about social non-movements in this way. But I was also very interested in your interpretation of that. And that's all. Thank you very much. And we start this session, and in the next future we'll discuss about Europe and Latin America in the same way.
Perfect. Mustafa, go ahead. Mustafa, can you activate your mic?
Okay. Okay. All right. Hi, Nelly. Good afternoon, and thanks for all the presenters, Kamel, Rachid, Najat, and Jose, Carles. Just one comment. I'm thinking about the presentation of Jose in the beginning of the seminar. I think that when you talked to Jose about the methodological issue, you told something about the indicators, the 5 indicators about how notifying and how to observe youth groups in the region. I think it is very interesting in the methodological perspective that we have to think about these indicators and to try to maybe enrich them, improve it, and it will allow us to see in what extent there are common characteristics about youth street groups in the region. We know that these groups are living more or less the same context in terms of economic situation, social relations, relations of the youth groups with the neighbors, etc. And I think it's a good point, and it shows that the methodology is not only a step that we do in the beginning, but it can be developed in the within the project. Thank you.
Okay, thanks so much, Mustafa, for your comment. Jose, you wanted to comment or answer?
Yeah, I have two comments. The first comment is about Mustafa talk about now, about the methodological indicators of Youth Street Group. This is obviously that it's a starting point for our research. It's a frame for our research. It's not exactly to apply in each location. And I said it during my presentation that we have problems in the case of North Africa to complete all these 5 indicators. But this, I think, another time, this is a starting point. If you find new indicators for youth street groups in the North Africa, sure that this is important and relevant to implement a theoretical and methodological position about youth street groups in general, globally, and to implement also and to for what not to abolish the dominant criminalistic perspective coming from the United States. This is very important. This is 5 indicators that you try to see in your data, and if you find other kind of indicator in the case of North Africa, sure that is welcome. Also, I say that in a general way, in North Africa, youth street groups are very flexible because it's not a rigid or a static grouping. It's more than this. Is an aggregation that the people inside and outside really quick. You know, in depending on the context. This is only my comment about Mustafa, and only my second comment is about that Carles said about Asef Bayat perspective on non-social. Okay, this is very real interesting point, no? But because I think that the idea of Asef Bayat that we work in our concept paper and other papers is that this is not a social. The idea is that it's not a social movement, really hierarchical with objectives, with all this kind of thing, as Rachid said in the presentation. It's a kind of everyday life resistance, everyday life resilience, and for this reason said non-social movements to distinguish of political social movements, as in the West we are normally treated with this kind of movements. Only these 2 little comments and finish.
Okay. Yes, sorry, I was taking my time to activate the micro. So are there any more questions? I know it's late, and let me check in the chat. No, there are no more questions or comments.
Yes, I'd like to talk. Can I?
Yes.
Can I say something?
Of course, Kamel.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much. You see, before it's about Jose's paper, and before Mustafa talked, I made the same observation. I said that when we compare, yes. Hang on. Can you see me now? What happened? I don't know. I'm looking for the camera.
Normally, it takes some time. I think.
Yeah. Can you see me now?
Just wait some seconds more, because I think there's a symbol that it is like in process. Because the last time was like that, but now, no.
It's all right. The most important is the sound, isn't it?
Yes, of course. It's go
yeah,
ahead.
All right. Yeah. It's about the indicators. I made the same observation, and I said I was writing. I said that when it comes to Maghreb, according to the situation, we know so far, I think that the indicators are rather to define and to make in the future. At the end of the studies, all these indicators are just in an hypothetical way. They are not definitive, because I think that the situation in Maghreb countries is more complex than that. This is the first point. Do you hear me, Jose? He didn't hear me.
Yes,
Oh.
yes, we hear you and we see you.
Ah, he heard me?
Yeah, Kamel.
Okay.
This is
No,
important.
I've got another point. I have another point for you, Jose. Okay. The second point is that what we consider in our team in Algeria is that the youth fit groups are not just an urban phenomenon, because we emphasize and we focus too much on urban places. They are very important, but they're not the only one. In our study, we think of focusing on rural areas. Why? Because we think to discover another very different way of dealing with this grouping. They have another logic, which is not urban at all. This is the
Kamel.
Yes. Finish.
Yes, please.
Yes.
These kind of discussions we must celebrate it, and inside you and your team, and we can discuss it. Okay, in your case, you said rural. What means rural exactly in Algeria? How many people live in Gendel?
Around 500,000, something like that. I don't know very well, but it is about the infrastructure, about the number of inhabitants, about so many indicators we have to define the rural space. And
okay,
when I talk about the urban,
look,
well, I think it's not.
Kamel,
Yeah.
we can discuss with your team in a meeting.
Yes.
This is not for a seminar. This is clear. We can discuss it. These kind of things. This is very important for us to discuss this implementation of the indicators. But you know that this is the starting point. And I said a lot of times, we can try to find new ways to understand youth street groups. Yes, and this is the task coming from the data. These 5 indicators is only a starting point, more and nothing less. Okay.
Okay, no problem. Can I say a last point about it for Sihem?
Okay, last point.
Can I make this point?
Then the last short comment.
Yeah.
On
Sihem, si vous,
oui.
Yeah, Sihem, si vous m'entendez,
Bonjour.
Si vous m'entendez, Sihem, vous dites que les jeunes ne font pas de politique, ne s'intéressent pas à la politique, etc. C'est la même chose qu'en Algérie, c'est la même chose. Et moi, je dis que c'est pas qu'ils n'aiment pas la politique ou alors que la politique est un peu difficile pour eux. Non, c'est par rapport à leur expérience avec la pratique de la politique dans nos sociétés, la pratique formelle. Alors que eux, premièrement, ils n'ont plus confiance en les institutions, et deuxièmement, ils veulent inventer, entre guillemets, un nouvel espace d'expression politique, qui est le leur en tant que groupe. C'est leur espace d'expression politique. Je ne sais pas si tu es d'accord avec moi sur ça. Ou...
Je peux répondre tout de suite ou...
Okay, yes, briefly.
Oui, en fait, j'ai pas dit que les jeunes ne s'intéressent pas à la politique. Effectivement, moi, j'ai adressé une critique à quelques travaux qui montrent que, d'ailleurs, il y a un nombre extrêmement important de travaux qui ont été publiés après la Révolution qui indiquent que les jeunes maghrébins ne s'intéressent plus à la chose publique et à la vie politique. Moi, j'ai adressé une critique à cette littérature pour dire que même si les jeunes déclare, d'ailleurs même dans plusieurs enquêtes qu'on a menées, y compris cette enquête dans le cadre de Transgang, même si les jeunes déclarent, les jeunes dans le secteur informel ou les jeunes qui ont développé des compétences artistiques, etc., même s'ils disent qu'ils ne s'intéressent pas à la chose publique, en fait, leurs actions s'inscrivent dans la sphère publique et renvoie un tout petit peu à des questions d'ordre politique, économique, etc. Sauf que, là je suis tout à fait d'accord avec vous, ils ont développé d'autres sphères de résistance, de discussion, d'action, etc., qui renvoient à la vie politique. Mais c'est, si l'on puisse dire, c'est faire la politique autrement. Voilà, donc on est bien d'accord, hein, moi.
Exactement.
Je ne sais pas si ça répond à votre question. Hein.
Oui, très bien, merci Sihem.
Merci à vous.
Perfect. So, Rachid, if you want to make a brief comment, and I think then we close this discussion.
Just briefly, when Kamel mentioned before the satanic scandal, and I think that I have to define this because we work on the heavy metal group. So satanic, according to José's indicator, is an external label, Kamel. So it was named, they were named satanic, but they were not satanic. These are heavy metal bands that started performing hard rock music, which Moroccans at the time in 2003 did not know. And then when they were put in the court, the judge told them, why do you have the skeleton and you wear black clothes? Ah, you are satanic, you are worshipping the state. So I think that the four indicators, I think, describe methodologically and epistemologically the groups we work in. So we have to be aware of external labels and what they call. So we as researchers, we have to see how these young people, because we work with them, how they describe themselves. So that's, I think, our contribution to the practice. In the case of the last question José mentioned, and I didn't have time to reflect on them, is the COVID situation and the post-COVID situation. And I think this is a big challenge for our research to understand informality, urbanism, and how the young people have dealt with during this situation. Also, the third and the last point is that I did not mention is transnationalism. So how, when I describe the humans of Sidi Moussa, there is always this dream of crossing to the other side. And you know, in the Maghrebi societies, migration really is in our imagination, our collective imagination, and in our, I will use the terms of José, our local memory history. So, and I think also these groups, now with internet, we should not have the same paradigms describing the Maghrebi societies, Kamel. So these are a new generation. We are talking about generation gap. We are talking about transnational groups that are using internet and Facebook and WhatsApp, and they are going beyond the borders or where they are located at. So we should have a new paradigms looking at the young people that they are living in transnational societies, in digital societies, and a lot of practices now are on Facebook, are in Facebook, not in street. The challenge again is this hybrid connection between the Zanqa Huma and the digital life, and what are the connections? I stop here.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Rachid. And José, I think it's good for you to close this session and this discussion.
Yeah.
And
no,
yeah,
I want only to comment something that maybe it's could be could be a good idea for the North African teams. I think that after the Christmas time, we can meet and discuss all these things, these methodological things, exactly what means politics, because I think that we have a little differences among what means politics, in what way, because I'm using politics in the way of Rasier. You know, this is other thing that is very clear that politics is in the whole life of these people. I think that it is very important that to understand, to implement our ideas and enlarge our perspective on politics. Because if not, you are talking about institutional politics, and the young people seems that they are not practicing politics. And at the end, they are practicing politics when they are selling goods in an informal market, sure, because it's a question of politics. Okay, this is only my comment, and I propose you a good date to discuss all the time. If we need 4 or 5 hours, we can discuss it in a virtual way, all these kind of things, implement our comparative work.
Perfect. So we see here fruitful discussions that you will have in the new year. And yeah, I think it's a good time to finish this seminar. Thanks all of you for to the speakers for your explanations and for your participation, to all the participants as well. And I think I hope, or we all hope, that you will have nice holidays and nice Christmas against all the odds and coronavirus going around and everything. And we will see each other next year in the next training seminar. And Carlos, if you want to close the session, and yeah, thank you.
No, just to say have a good Christmas time, and we hope that next year the coronavirus will end and our field work will be better, even if, as Rachid said, it's also interesting to investigate how these pandemics affects our object of study, that are street youth groups. So good luck. This has been the first attempt to start the meta ethnography, and we will improve in the future this attempt. Thank you very much.